In Ecuador, the government held a meeting with U.S. authorities under the pretext of addressing the internal armed conflict. In Mexico, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs called for an investigation on the entry of U.S. military weapons into the national territory. In Palestine, the Israeli regime intensified its attacks on Khan Yunis as thousands evacuated to Rafah, where conditions worsened by the hour. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro denounced on Monday that some sectors of the opposition seek to promote scenarios of violence and uncertainty in the country. The accusation was made during the president's TV program Con Maduro Más, where the head of state stressed that the objective is to blame him for the violent incidents created. Maduro said those sectors are betting on a coup d'etat to jump to power and generate violence, that they also bet on assassination and economic and psychological warfare to create chaos and make people desperate. The Bolivarian leader reiterated that the people knew who the true responsible for the sanctions were and who the criminals that have attacked the stability of the economy and the country were, and highlighted the revolutionary character of Venezuelans.
All those involved, the material authors of these 5 conspiracies, were discovered by the state intelligence, the DG SEBIN, the patriotic officers and the people. All of them are under arrest, and I can tell you more. They have confessed. Their testimonies are there, recorded and written, confirming their plans to attack military units, to fill the country with violence, revealing their political accomplices and their policies, and in the civilian field, revealing their plans to assassinate me. To assassinate General Padrino, to assassinate Governor Freddy Bernal. Everything confessed, and besides, well, there are other technological and physical evidence which are already being handled by the I believe that Venezuela has a public prosecutor's office of the highest professional, scientific, and technological level. Our police are of the highest level. Our powerful intelligence has saved the country from a bloodbath and from getting involved in armed violence, which is what our enemies want.
In Venezuela, Attorney General Tarek William Saab offered details and testimonies on the latest conspiracies against the state, unveiled and prosecuted by the security forces and the Public Prosecutor's Office. In his speech, broadcast on national and international channels, the Attorney General revealed 5 moments and criminal terrorist actions that tried to bathe Venezuela in blood. He said that the captured soldiers are mercenaries from Colombia. The official indicated that the details of who pays for ammunition, weapons, air or land transfers and have clear tracks of financing are known. William Saab added that the detainees are convicted, confessed and have revealed information about the plans against the majority of the Venezuelan people and the democratic society. Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek William also highlighted how they operated to recruit security personnel to obtain information related to presidential security.
Through intelligence work, it was determined that a group of civilians and police officers were operating in coordination with members of foreign intelligence organization. These conspirators were operating in meetings with the purpose of recruiting members of security agencies to gain access to confidential information related to presidential security. They always have been with this obsession of assassination against the head of the state, President Nicolás Maduro. It is an obsession that keeps them awake at night and against high authorities of the state and government of Venezuela.
In this context, Venezuela's Defense Minister Chief General Padrino Lopez also warned about the objective pursued by the destabilizing plans of the extreme right wing linked to agencies operating from abroad.
Once again, we are faced with these episodes financed from outside, planned from outside to cause pain, to spill Venezuelan blood, to continue in the empty attempt to fracture to fragment the Venezuelan society, to go to war with each other, to civil war. Are the desperate attempts of the extreme right that is linked to foreign agencies, the United States imperialism.
Venezuelan Chief General Vladimir Padrino added that the 5 conspiratorial episodes described by the Attorney General are linked to United States agencies.
We have been listening to the 5 conspiracy episodes, and as all of them are linked to agencies such as DEA, the CIA, the Southern Command, we cannot be careless. We are with our eyes wide open. Our institutions and our counterintelligence and strategic intelligence organizations observing the whole panorama, precisely to prevent the people of Venezuela from suffering the damages of a systematic, permanent aggression against our people, against our country, against our homeland.
The Ecuadorian government held a meeting with U.S. authorities on the pretext of addressing the internal armed conflict in the country. This Monday, President Daniel Noboa met in the city of Quito with U.S. Senator Christopher Dodd and General Laura Richardson. The meeting was also attended by the Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Gabriela Sommerfeld and the ministers of the security axis. A statement issued by the Ecuadorian presidency explains that both parties agreed to increase cooperation in security and defense. Analysts and social organizations warn that the security crisis that Ecuador is experiencing and the declaration of an internal armed conflict could be an opportunity for the United States to increase its military presence and sale of armament to the South American country. On Monday in Mexico, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Alicia Bárcena, called for an investigation into the entry to Mexican territory of weapons of exclusive use of the United States military. Meanwhile, the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador has already filed 2 lawsuits against U.S. firearms manufacturers and distributors. For his part, the United States ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, declared that the White House seeks to combat the flow of arms and that they are aware that 70% of the arms that enter Mexico are linked to U.S. producers. According to official data, more than 500,000 arms are trafficked annually from the United States to Mexico. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. In Colombia, the coffin carrying the remains of Senator Piedad Córdoba arrived in Bogotá, where they paid tribute to her in a funeral chapel in the Constitutional Hall of Congress. Córdoba's body was transported to Bogotá from Quibdó, where she was bid farewell by her relatives and close friends. The tributes to the outstanding activists in Congress of the Colombian Republic will be held until 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday in the Constitutional Hall. The acts are for all public, so citizens who want to say goodbye to Senator can enter the Congress. The body of Senator Piedad Córdoba will later be taken to Medellin, her hometown, where the funeral ceremony will be held and she will receive a Christian burial. In this context, Vice President Francia Márquez paid posthumous tribute to Senator Piedad Córdoba. Márquez thanked Córdoba for the path that opened the doors of politics for Colombian women.
As Vice President, I have to say that Piedad Córdoba opened the doors for women in politics in this country, but for black women in this country. I would not be Vice President without the path that she took along with many other women and men of this nation. Thank you, Piedad, for believing in the peace of Colombia. For going into the jungles to rescue kidnapped people. Even if this country has not recognized it, I will always wonder it. Why a woman who had done such an important job has not recognized a value in this country? But now that I am here, I understand the pettiness of politics and the human pettiness that sometimes do not allow us to recognize these acts of greatness that deepen the democracy of the country like Colombia.
Likewise, the Colombian Vice President Francia Marquez thanked Piedad Córdoba once again for teaching women not to silence their voices before anyone.
Thank you for being brave, for telling the truth in the face of everyone, even if they don't like it, even to many of men and women comrades with whom she was built together with. Thank you because she taught us, black women, not to be silent, not to bow our heads. Piedad was always a woman who looked regal. And until her last days, when she was in the hospital several times, one could see her very regal because she never bowed down. Always with her elegance, always with that dignity that characterizes us as people, as women.
Well, the Israeli occupation army acknowledged 21 soldiers killed on Monday amid fighting with the Palestinian resistance movement. In this regard, Israel Defense Forces spokesman Daniel Hagari linked the death of the soldiers to an explosion as a result of mines placed by Israeli troops to demolish buildings. It must be emphasized that the total number of dead in the Israeli army in Gaza has risen to 219. For his part, Israeli army spokesman declared that the tragedy became the deadliest event for the Zionist troops since the beginning of the total siege of the Gaza Strip. In Gaza, the situation continues to worsen for Palestinian citizens. Hundreds of refugees have been displaced from Khan Yunis to Rafah, and many others are dying from lack of food, water, and different diseases. Our correspondent Nur Harsin with the details.
Days pass and the situation here in Gaza is actually getting harder today. Since the very early hours of this morning, Palestinians are now evacuating the city of Khan Yunis, even though Khan Yunis is marked as a green area, as a safe area, and where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians evacuated their homes from northern Gaza to Khan Yunis city. However, now Palestinians are forced to flee their shelters, basically, in Khan Yunis to another shelter in Rafah. We saw hundreds of families taking their stuff, mattresses, blankets, and some food to evacuate here to the city of Rafah. And here's the thing, Rafah is such a small area. More than 1.5 million people actually now reside in the city of Rafah that was designed to house only 300,000 people. So the situation here is catastrophic. It is overcrowded with people. There is spread of diseases, infectious diseases. The weather is really cold. There is rarely any aid being distributed, adding the fact that now Palestinians need even more than food and water. They need clothes, they need blankets. We are actually, as reporters, journalists, getting reports of people dying from the freezing weather with no clothes, children dying because of the lack of food and water. Palestinians are now, if they survive the Israeli bombardment, they will die from the diseases or the hunger and thirst. Roharazin TeleSUR, Gaza.
In the Palestinian city of Rafah, volunteers at one of the city's cemeteries are reopening all graves to find place to bury the dead amid continuous Israeli army bombardment of the southern Gaza city. At a cemetery in the east of the city, grandfather Jalal Abu Hasna watched as teams of volunteers bury his slain granddaughters, niece, and cousin in ancient graves, some of which date back to the 1980s. The relatives were killed early Monday when a shell hit the tent in which the family was sheltering in Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis has in recent months become one of the fronts in the conflict between Israeli forces and Hamas militants in Gaza. According to cemetery volunteers, some of the largest old graves hold up to 17 corpses.
We were in our tent. A shell fell over our heads. My son's two daughters were martyred. my brother, and the daughter of my cousin. I wanted to bury them in a grave, each on their own. But because there are plenty of martyrs of the huge disaster, we had to bury them in a mass grave.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Found short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. In the United States, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has withdrawn from the 2024 presidential race. The decision was made due to clear indications that the politician is losing to former President Donald Trump in the Republican primaries. On his social media X, DeSantis assured the majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. DeSantis committed to support the Republican candidate. Another contender for the Republican nomination, Nikki Haley, noted that DeSantis ran a great race, has been a good governor, and wished him well, but said she does not plan to give Trump a free hand. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to resort to legal battles to attack the former president. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken begins a week-long tour of Africa's west coast with the primary objective of sustaining U.S. influence in the context of strong competition from Beijing and Moscow and an escalating instability in the Sahel region. His journey has begun with a brief stopover in Cape Verde, with subsequent destinations including Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Angola. This is Blinken's first visit to sub-Saharan Africa in 10 months, in the middle of the dominant international focus on the Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas conflict. Despite President Joe Biden's unfulfilled promise to visit Africa in 2023, Blinken's tour comes at a time of evolving political landscape since his last visit to the region in March 2023.
The United States is committed to deepening, to strengthening, to broadening our partnerships across Africa, partnerships that benefit Africans and Americans alike. As President Biden has said, we are all in when it comes to Africa.
On the last day of the G77 plus China summit, leaders and heads of government demanded transformation of the financial system and condemned the genocide against the Palestinian people. At the closing of the discussions of the integration mechanism from the city of Kampala, delegations point out that in order to obtain different results in terms of development, equity, protection of life and the environment, bold and different actions must be taken. The president of Uganda, who also assumes the presidency of the group, assured that many countries are trying to comply with the 2030 agenda to face the global challenges. The new leader of the G77 denounced the unfair treatment they receive from countries that control the global financial sector. While awaiting a final declaration, the Cuban delegation emphasized that the group came out of Kampala united and strengthened. In this context, Uganda's head of state, Yoweri Museveni, who assumed the temporary chairmanship of the group of 77 plus China, questioned the demands made on developing countries while ignoring the weight of sanctions. Museveni warned that the Sustainable Development Goals targets imposed on developing countries are currently unattainable. Uganda's president invited to reflect on how to fight poverty, hunger, and inequality under occupation, a term he used to refer to the sanctions imposed by the United States and the World Bank. In Cameroon, authorities launched the first systematic childhood vaccination campaign against malaria. This is the world's first routine childhood malaria vaccination campaign and is expected to be extended this year to some 20 African countries. Children in 42 districts of Cameroon will receive the vaccine after it has been successfully tested in pilot programs in Kenya, Ghana, and Malawi between 2019 and 2023. 95% of malaria cases occur in Africa each year, as well as 96% of deaths, and Cameroon is one of the countries most affected. On Monday, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, arrived in Beijing for his week-long China visit, marking the first by a leader from Latin America and the Caribbean region in 2024. The Caribbean country, a longtime China partner, supports the China proposed Belt and Road Initiative to leverage its economy and become a gateway of China cooperation in the Caribbean region. Brown's visit highlights the trend of enhanced China-Latin American and Caribbean exchanges, which lead not only to deepening mutual trust but also to extensive development opportunities. Upon his arrival, Brown told the media that he expected his China trip to further elevate bilateral relations. The Prime Minister also hailed China's role as an example to advocate peaceful coexistence and global prosperity. Brown will hold meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Qiang, and Chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Xiao Leji. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.